Happy New Year, everybody! It is Musashi X here, welcoming you to another new year of gaming. And sadly for me, it's gonna be a bad start of the year for me. You might be wondering, why a bad start when it's just only the first few days of the year? Well, we got another marathon coming our way, folks. And to kick this new year off, today's subject matter will be Kingdom Hearts. So sit back, relax, get your Keyblades under ready, because the marathon for the Chronicles starts right now. Oh, Kingdom Hearts, where do I begin with you? Even now, I still find this crossover of Disney and Square-Enix characters still a strange concept, and it turns out Square and Disney did meet up at one point of discussing on making a crossover game with the type of genre being unknown at the time, and they asked well-known designer Tetsuya Nomura to lead the project, making it its debut as a game director, which in my opinion is sort of mixed, and I'm sure you'll know why that is as the marathon goes along. Now, what's my history with this game? Well, this game first came out in 2002, and it was also in that same year that my parents got me a PlayStation 2. And it's also the best present I ever got. What the PlayStation 1 did for the 5th generation era, the PlayStation 2 doubled up my gaming experience for the 6th generation. And unlike most people that have heard of this game through commercials, in contrast, I saw preview footages of it from the old Tech TV show, Extended Play, before it became X-Play and the eventual fate of G4, but that's a discussion for another time. Like everyone else, I also seen many Disney movies from 101 Dalmatians to Beauty and the Beast to Hercules and so forth. And seeing both Disney and Final Fantasy characters interacting with one another is actually amazing despite the surreal concept. There's no denying that I actually sunk so many hours into playing this game, even doing a 100% run. And Square Enix knew that they wouldn't just stop with this title, making it wait for another sequel. Eventually we did, but in the form of the GBA game Chain of Memories, which is actually an interquel between one and eventually the next game that we get years later, which is the second game.
I'll confess that later games after Kingdom Hearts 2, like 358 Days Over 2, or Birth by Sleep for example, I've only played them for about a few hours when they first came out and then stopped, mainly because like everyone else, we really wanted for Kingdom Hearts 3 to finally come out, which we now know the date to be January 29th. Heck, my hype for it came back upon playing the demo of the game at Anime Expo this past year. In fact, you could say that I'm very much burned out after Kingdom Hearts 2, as it drags on forever, and all seemed lost for Kingdom Hearts 3 until it finally resurfaced for the final time, thank goodness.
For this marathon, we're going to be looking at the HD re-releases of the games, and these versions are actually their final mixes. And by final mix, they're actually previously Japan-only versions of the games with extra content and added plot elements that would foreshadow future events in the series. Heck, Final Fantasy X, X-2, and 12 would have their own final mixes called international versions, and would also get the same Japan-only treatment until years later when the US finally had them in the form of Final Fantasy X and X-2 Remaster and Zodiac Age respectively.
The console versions of both 358 Days and Coded are relegated to just cutscenes only due to the inability of emulating the game engine, so I'll also review the games in their entirety when I get to it. I'll also review both the GBA and PS2 versions of Chain of Memories as one video soon.
Even though I have the PlayStation 4 version, I'll stick with the PlayStation 3 versions, if only because, well, even though it's cool to see gameplay on 60 frames per second on the PS4 version, there's just something about playing these games in 30 frames per second that feels a little bit more nostalgic to me. I mean, the PlayStation 2 version does play on 30 frames, so I'll definitely stick with this version. Even though I like all these games, this whole marathon is gonna suck for me for all the wrong reasons. So if this is the first time you're playing Kingdom Hearts, well, be prepared to hear a lot of spoilers, but if you want to skip the spoilers, then I suggest you click on a certain time on this video and future videos after this. So, well, all I can say now is welcome to the Kingdom Hearts Marathon. Oh heaven, please save my soul.
The protagonist is a teenager named Sora who loves hanging out on Destiny Islands with his friends Kairi, Riku, and the kid versions of Selphie from Final Fantasy VIII, and Tidus and Wakka from the Final Fantasy X saga. However, lately Sora has been having some strange dreams of himself inside what seems to be a dark abyss until he comes across platforms with arts of various Disney princesses and a disembodied voice giving him some kind of counseling, just as Sora is trying to fight off these shadows that are gunning towards him. During one sunset in Destiny Islands, the trio are discussing if there are other worlds out there besides their own, so they decided to build a raft and check it out for themselves. Elsewhere in the castle, aptly named Castle Disney, a note was left by its king, which is Mickey Mouse of course, explaining that after the disappearances of various worlds, Mickey goes on to investigate the incidents himself, which forced Donald Duck and Goofy, who are the castle's retainer and captain of the guards respectively, to head over to Traverse Town in hopes of searching for someone who Mickey believes is the key to stopping the incidents. Definitely not a good sign of a ruler if the ruler just dives in head first without any consent from the advisors. That's how kingdoms can fall, and I've read enough of the Three Kingdoms to know that. During one night, Sora sees the island from the distance having a huge storm, so he went over there and notices both boats of Riku and Kairi, and sees that the land is invaded by the shadows from his dream, but quickly gets away from them. He then sees a strangely calm Riku, who then proclaims that the door is opened. Just as Sora is about to get close, a dark anomaly started engulfing both of them, but as soon as Riku vanishes, a mystical weapon called a Keyblade appears on Sora's hand and uses it to fight off the shadows. Just as Sora finds Kairi, they are suddenly separated and was forced to take out the giant shadow that is also from his dream, and upon doing so, was then sucked into a vortex of shadow, sending him to Traverse Town. After fighting off a few shadows, he then encounters Squall from Final Fantasy VIII.
That's Leon.
I'm still calling you Squall anyways, so cry me a river, yo.
The two proceeded to duel for the possession of the Keyblade, but regardless of who wins, Sora still faints from fatigue and was brought into an inn by both Squall and Yuffie from Final Fantasy VII, with both of them giving Sora information on the shadows that attacked him, which are called Heartless. In another room of the same inn, Donald and Goofy encountered Aerith, also from Final Fantasy VII, who not only informs them of the Heartless that consumed her world, but also informs them of a person named Ansem, someone who she believes may know how the Heartless came to be. It turns out that they can steal hearts from people and turn them into Heartless themselves, and the Keyblade chose Sora to wield it in order to stop the Heartless and restore order to the universe by sealing the Heartless keyhole in each world. Just when Sora was trying to piece together what's happening, the Heartless starts invading the inn, forcing Sora to take them out, but never fear, Donald and Goofy come in as cavalry. The three manage to defeat the Heartless momentarily, and the three set off in their gummy ship in order to find not only Mickey, but hopefully Riku and Kairi as well. Meanwhile, Disney's Gallery of Rogues, led by Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, have the intention of using the power of the Heartless to take over a specific world, but also the universe as a whole. So it's up to Sora, Donald, and Goofy to travel to different worlds from different Disney franchises, such as Wonderland from Alice in Wonderland, the Deep Jungle from Tarzan, the Olympus Coliseum from Hercules, Monstro the Whale from Pinocchio, Agrabah from Aladdin, Atlantica from The Little Mermaid, Halloween Town from The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Neverland from Peter Pan. In each world you visit, because of the Heartless setting up shop, the plot in each world is very much, for a lack of better term, retellings of each franchise, with some problems that the world's characters needed help with, and some villains having different fates upon defeat, but still maintain themselves getting their comeuppance anyway. I know it's a strange thing to say, given how I've grown up watching these films, and as great as they are to see them in this game, some are presented nicely, especially Hades, but some characters and the plot point of each Disney world seemed kind of flimsy and didn't seem to have the exact characterization that we come to know in their respective films. The main story is mostly the gang trying to rescue Riku, Kairi, and Mickey, while also sealing away every keyhole in each world they come across. It didn't take long for Sora to be reunited with Riku, only for Riku to become slowly resentful of Sora, especially being manipulated by Maleficent to harbor the darkness within him. As for Maleficent, her goal is to gather 7 princesses of heart in order to use their hearts to open a keyhole to what she believes to be infinite power, and it turns out that Kairi is one of those 7 maidens, but her heart is not within her and was hidden elsewhere. But the real deal of how this whole story began is when this hooded figure who Sora earlier in the story, and later Riku encountered, tells Riku to embrace his inner darkness, and this figure is a man named Ansem, who was mentioned earlier by Aerith and was previously a researcher on how the Heartless came to be, and is responsible for letting them loose and started conquering worlds, manipulating Maleficent behind her back, and eventually entices Riku long enough to be his own vessel, making Riku a possessed edgelord. It's then revealed by Ansem that Kairi's heart is within Sora and will do what he can to rip it out of him. Shortened to the point, Sora was too much for Ansem, forcing his escape. Sora then uses Ansem's Keyblade to release Kairi's heart, but also restore the other princesses at the cost of his own existence. Ansem then returns now with a new body, trapping Riku within him, and is about to strike until Riku's spirit was able to hold Ansem off, allowing Kairi, Donald, and Goofy to escape. Upon his self-sacrifice, Sora re-emerges as a Heartless himself, but not really devoid of any emotion whatsoever like any other Heartless, as evidenced by Kairi sensing Sora's spirit within it, and was able to restore Sora to life and proceeds to seal the final keyhole. With no time to lose, the team follows Ansem to the end of the world, and after the final match, Ansem tells the team of the sacred door that leads to Kingdom Hearts, which is said to be the source of infinite evil, but in reality it contains light, which ultimately destroys Ansem. The worlds are slowly restoring, but they won't be fully restored until the door is completely shut for good, and with some last-minute help from both Riku and then Mickey Mouse, they are able to seal the door, but at the cost of Riku and Mickey separated from them, which also resulted in Sora and the team separated from Kairi, as she's the only one that returned to the restoring Destiny Islands. So the team is left walking on a somewhat endless road, pondering on how to find her allies again, but out of nowhere, Pluto appears with Mickey's letter signaling that there's still hope yet, leaving us with a cliffhanger that was intentionally left by director Nomura himself. And should you get 100% on everything in this game like I did, you get this hidden cutscene about some hooded figure wielding 2 Keyblades, fighting off Heartless one by one, and eventually some blindfolded figure, and that's the end of it. And that's when the waiting game happens. Now, what are my thoughts of this game? First off, the story itself is actually not that bad. I can clearly understand the difference of good and evil, but when it comes to characterization, the Disney characters act the part like they would in their films, but don't really have that much relevance. Not even Maleficent, who does the villain archetype justice, but at the end of it, she's just a pawn as any other Disney villains in the game, in order to make way for Ansem. Ansem is a good villain in his own right, but could have had more backstory to him than just reading about him in just text of his collectible reports alone. Had the game implemented any flashback cutscenes, it would have definitely helped as to who Ansem is all about. But at the end of it, it's just Sora taking down the Heartless and saving worlds. Speaking of characters, it's cool to see Disney characters like Aladdin, Genie, Tarzan, or Jack Skellington, just to name a few, as well as Final Fantasy characters like Aerith, Yuffie, Squall, Sid, and the Muggles lending some assistance, and beating the heck out of Cloud's Drive cause he deserves what's coming to him. Sound presentation is exactly what you'd expect from Square Enix, ranging from the game's original pieces, especially that beautiful song Simple and Clean by Utada Hikaru, to familiar themes like Atlantica, the 100 Acre Wood, which is very cute to wander around in. Heck, they even put one of my favorite classical songs, Night on Bald Mountain by Modest Mussorgsky, during your match against Chernobog from Fantasia. As for voice acting, it's great to see that some of the Disney characters retained their voice actors like Aladdin, Jack, and Ariel, just to name a few. Heck, Hades is once again voiced by James Woods. I mean, who doesn't like James Woods? He does the character justice. For the Final Fantasy cast, Square Enix would get actual celebrities to voice act them, like David Boreanaz of Buffy and Angel as Squall, singer and actress Mandy Moore as Aerith, Christy Carlson Romano of Kim Possible as Yuffie, and NSYNC's Lance Bass as Sephiroth, though it's hard to catch what he's saying because I had to fight him, but we'll get to Sephiroth later. The main characters also have good voice actors as well, with Sora being voiced by Haley Joel Osment, Riku being voiced by David Gallagher from Seventh Heaven, Kairi voiced by Hayden Panettiere from the show Heroes, and the big bad of the game, Ansem, is voiced by actor Billy Zane. As for the Mouseketeers themselves, it's great to hear Tony Anselmo still doing the voice of Donald Duck since 1985, and Bill Farmer as Goofy since 1987. As for Mickey, he would be voiced by the late Wayne Allwine before his passing 7 years after the first game, and is considered the most iconic voice of Mickey. But what of the actual gameplay? The gameplay is a real-time hack-and-slash RPG where you gain experience points from defeated enemies, and whenever you level up, you'll also gain action points in order to straighten Sora as well as equip certain moves that you can perform in battle. Taking a page from Final Fantasy, you'll eventually gain magical abilities like casting fire, ice, or thunder, as well as supporting spells like wind, cure, or casting stop to freeze some enemies in place for a free shot. And later down the road, you'll also cast summons, but not the ferocious kind that we know in Final Fantasy. Instead, they are all Disney characters, like Dumbo, Genie, Tinkerbell, Mushu, Simba, or Bambi, the latter being my most used summon just for its ability to gain helpful items. Donald and Goofy are your main teammates throughout your adventure, but as you enter certain worlds, you can swap your members with another member that's associated with that world. Personally, I would often keep at least Donald in my team just for healing purposes if enemies were to keep me from healing myself. Sadly, whenever you leave that world, that extra member has to remain in that world. Unless certain events are mandatory to have that special member, you're better off sticking with the primary trio, especially when you need to perform Trinity moves to unlock some important treasures. Be warned that out of the three, Donald, being a magician, will never hesitate to drain his own MP in seconds, regardless of how many Heartless there are in the field. But then again, he does cater to his temperamental personality, so there's that. Goofy kinda does it as well, but to a lesser extent, but can carry more items to help the team. Sora can very much do what both Mouseketeers can do, as he can hack and slash with his Keyblade and perform different abilities exclusive to him. Not to mention his Keyblade is a popular cosplay prop, and I hope that in some point in my life I can create Keyblades on my own designs, given my exposure to so many pop culture as of late. As good as the fight mechanics are, it's better if you try to play defensively and not go bonkers, because you'll also need to take the environment into account, because there's nothing more irritating than to find yourself falling down from a higher structure after defeating a flying enemy, forcing yourself to backtrack. As far as world traveling is concerned, you're piloting a gummy ship and go through a shooting sequence, which immediately can get monotonous, but it is mandatory if you're going to an entirely new world that is yet to be explored. Eventually, you'll get a part called a warp drive that lets you warp into an already visited world, skipping the shooting sequences entirely, and with some gummy parts that you got while flying, you can customize your ship, which, believe it or not, can actually affect the stats of your ship. The game is designed so well that not only does it provide deep exploration, but each world gives enough variety to have Sora do something outside of the usual Heartless smackdown. Whether it be swimming around Atlantica, vine swinging in Deep Jungle, or take on the various challenges in Olympus Coliseum. There's also not much puzzles to solve, as it mostly boils down to just reaching a certain point, and any path you come across there will be at least a treasure or two, or a chest that contains some of the 101 Dalmatians which you'll need to collect if you're gunning for 100%. Heck, you're better off trying to get everything so that you can make your life easier by constantly fighting in the Coliseum, or if you have the ultimate weapon and enough ribbons through item synthesis, you can blaze through most bosses, with the exception of the Ice Titan, the 6th armed Kurtziza in Agrabah, the Phantom in London, which sadly you need Peter Pan in your team, and he sucks big time what with his Donald-like behavior and weaker defense. This foreshadowing hooded figure in the Final Mix version who hits hard, but nothing compares to Sephiroth himself, who is very much a battleship in terms of damage output, and if you get hit by his Heartless Angel attack, you'll be buying the farm in just 2 hits, son. Regardless of difficulty setting, it's just you mashing that attack button and every Heartless will go down like flies. It may not be fast-paced hack and slashing like Dynasty Warriors 2 through 5, but the fight mechanics are solid enough to ensure nothing is complicated, especially if it's your first time playing.
During the years of the PlayStation 2, I had no regrets playing the game non-stop. It was a real blast to play, and after replaying it again, I then come to a realization that the game has actually aged. Not too well, but not too bad either. Sort of in a middle ground. Somewhat. For a PlayStation 2 title, the graphics and models of the games of both companies are well made, The environments are visually stunning for its time, the story is not too complex, and the overall combat is very satisfying, especially when you deliver the final blow. I'm sure that even with the final mixed content, while still not a perfect game overall, there's enough in this game to make your experience wonderful in many aspects. So for the final score, I'm going to give this game a 9. Well, we're off to a good start in this marathon. So up next, before we get on to Kingdom Hearts 2, we're going to be looking at the in-between story of Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. So next up in the marathon, we're going to be looking at both the GBA and the PS2 versions of Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. Until then, this has been Musashi X, and I bid you all farewell, take care, and stay tuned.